کنفرانس در ژنو، تالار تاریخی ویکتوریا. اشرف، ایران، چشماندازهای نوین. با حضور رئیس جمهور برگزیده مقاومت. 22 سپتامبر 2011، 31 شهریور 90.
I don't think that the next speaker need any introduction. Rudy Giuliani served 2 terms as the mayor of New York, and that during the most difficult time of the history of his city. His leadership during and after the 11th of September was very impressive, and he was named Person of the Year by Time magazine and knighted by the Queen of England. Mayor, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, President Rajavi, all of the distinguished guests that are here. I am very honored to be here, to speak up on behalf of a cause that is a cause for all of us. You know, the greatest role that the United States has played in human history is a role that it's its most constructive and its most uplifting. It's when we help people who seek human dignity, freedom, peace, the rule of law, when we help them to achieve their dream. Why has America done that? America has done that because your dream is the dream of America. That people living in freedom, people living in dignity, people living under the rule of law will make for a peaceful world for all of us. And until we can achieve that, we're not going to achieve peace. So, there's no place on earth right now where human rights are violated more, where human dignity is desecrated more than Iran. All of us have made mistakes in the past. The United States, all of you. But we learn from our mistakes. We grow from them. Your movement stands for a free Iran, democracy, the rule of law, a nuclear-free Iran, equal rights for women, freedom of religion. You stand for all the things that we stand for. We're allies. We have the same dreams, the same hopes, the same ambitions for our children and for our people. You're our best hope of achieving that dream for Iran. Now, there's a decision pending here in Geneva that is of critical importance. The UN High Commission can, just with the stroke of a pen, set up a monitorship for Ashraf, a monitorship by the United Nations. That decision should be made now, without delay, without going through hurdles and all kinds of bureaucratic procedures. Because the longer it takes, the more people will be injured, the more people that may be murdered. So we should all, with one voice, demand that the Commissioner make that decision as soon as she returns from New York. Immediately. Not 3 days from now, not a week from now, not a month from now, but now. Here's what I learned today. One of the reasons that they're delaying making this decision is because they can't figure out, if they set up a monitorship, how they're going to protect the monitors. Well, if you can't protect the monitorship, what about protecting the people at Ashraf? If the monitors are under danger, what kind of danger exists for the people in Ashraf? That should require you to make the decision quicker, faster. I'm sure we can find people to help protect the monitors. We can solve that problem. But the only way to solve the problem for the people in Ashraf is to have UN monitorship now, not later. You know, the United States has a lot of friends and a lot of enemies. But it strikes me that at this point in our history, there is no greater enemy to the United States than Iran. But it's not Iran. It's not the people of Iran. It's not your people. Our enemies are the mullahs and the man who right now, ironically, is in New York while I'm here in Geneva, Ahmadinejad. That if I were still mayor, I could find a lot of places to send him in New York. I won't say what would happen to him, but we have a common enemy. Ahmadinejad, the mullahs, the theocratic regime in Iran, and by all fair, independent, objective analysis, whether it's the United Kingdom or it's the European Union, the designation in 1997 of terrorism was a designation that, for whatever strategic purposes at that time, no longer has any validity. It no longer exists. Seems to me there's only one country that agrees with us on the designation. Only one left. Iran. Well, that should tell us something. Not only should it be removed because it's unfair and has no basis in law or fact any longer, it should be removed because the designation itself is killing people. It is leading to justification for murder. When we look at what happened last April at Camp Ashraf, which is not the first time that it's happened, over 30 people dead, 300 people injured, because the regime in Iraq is trying to ingratiate itself with Iran, it argues in favor of, number one, lifting the designation immediately. Number two, for us to give support to all of those who are seeking freedom for Iran. We missed a great opportunity a few years ago when right out of the streets of Iran there was a cry for freedom, for democracy, for human dignity, for peace. I am ashamed that my country turned its back on those people. I remember a different kind of an America. I remember the people of Poland seeking freedom. And I remember an American president, Ronald Reagan, standing with the people of Poland. I remember him going to the Berlin Wall and saying, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." Well, we need that kind of leadership now. We need that kind of leadership from America and from the Western world to say to Iran, tear down the mullahs, tear down the theocracy, and throw out Ahmadinejad. know, we supported regime change in Egypt. We supported regime change in Libya. We have now recently supported regime change in Syria. All of those dictators had a terrible record of human rights violations and have done terrible things to their people. But it's nothing in comparison to what the mullahs and Ahmadinejad have been doing to the people of Iran since 1979. Nothing. So if we're for regime change in Egypt, and we're for regime change in Libya, and we're for regime change in Syria, all three of which do not constitute a particular threat to the United States of America, by the way. Horrible situation. I believe we're on the right side, but they don't pose a strategic threat to my country. Iran does pose a strategic threat to the United States of America. Iran, under its present government, is the single biggest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, and terrorism is directed at the United States and at Europe. I believe that my country should be for regime change in Iran. And we should be clearly on record seeking regime change there. And instead of turning our backs when people in Iran rise up to seek freedom, we should stand with them. And finally, let me reiterate that we should all be for setting up a monitorship immediately for Camp Ashraf. No more delays, no more excuses. If things in Ashraf are so bad that we have to protect the monitors, well, then we have to protect the people of Ashraf. And we have to begin a sensible program of relocation because they are no longer safe in Iraq, which is a horrible comment to make after all that we sacrificed for Iraq, that the Iraqi government would allow people and participate in the slaughter of people at Camp Ashraf. But that's the reality. So, I have a dream, and it's the same dream that you have for Iran. And I believe this will happen. I have a dream of an Iran that's a free Iran, a democratic Iran. I have a dream that President Rajavi will be able to return to Iran. And that could do so much for the world. What a great civilization. What a great history. What a great people. How horrible that they've been held in such oppression for so long. Just think of what we've been denied. Just think of what the human race has been denied. An Iran that is free. An Iran that is peaceful. An Iran that respects human rights, human dignity, the rights of women, religious freedom. My goodness, what that could do for the world. You've already, your civilization, your culture has given this world so much. You're being deprived of giving it now. That's what we're fighting for. That's what we will achieve. God bless you, and God bless you in your quest for freedom.
you very much. Now I'm calling Governor Ed Randall. He served 2 terms as the governor of Pennsylvania from 2003 to 2011, and he was also the chairman of the Democratic Party during the 2000 presidential election. Governor, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, everyone. Madam President, let me begin by saying, after seeing the performances from Camp Ashraf and seeing talented men and talented women sitting right next to each other performing together, when the time comes, I think I speak for all the Americans here, we'll take every single one of those 3,400 people. You know, Mayor Giuliani spoke very eloquently about what America has stood for. And as young Americans, we are raised to believe that America is a special place, that America is the guardian of freedom and democracy, that America stands for the right values about life. And for me, the most important thing as an American and as a Jew, the things that are most important to me is that America has always stood up to genocide, has always said, we're going to be there when people are being slaughtered because of who they are, because of their political beliefs, because of their religious beliefs. We won't let genocide happen. We did it once, we've learned, and never again. And in fact, 2 of the most recent successes of American foreign policy, one by the Clinton administration and one by the Obama administration, occurred when America took action to prevent genocide. President Clinton was roundly criticized when he sent American air power into Kosovo. But he said that America couldn't stand by idly and let Milosevic slaughter 500,000 Kosovar Muslims. And we prevented that genocide from happening. The death stopped. Genocide didn't occur. Milosevic was toppled. And then more recently, President Obama was also criticized for joining with NATO nations and having the same type of air power to support not only the Libyan rebels, but more importantly, to stop genocide that was going to happen to hundreds of thousands of Libyans in Benghazi. And despite the criticism, it worked. There was no genocide. No one was slaughtered. And I believe we acted in the best sense of American values and American ideals. And now it's time for us to do the same at Ashraf. And we have failed at Ashraf. America has turned its back on its basic values and the things we believe in. I was shown by members of your organization the individual documents that every citizen of Ashraf signed with the United States of America, saying that if they gave up their weapons, we would guarantee their protection and their safety, that they would be protected by the Geneva Convention, and America would be the guarantor. Well, we didn't do such a very good job. We walked away twice. And we literally walked away. There were American troops poised to take action to stop that partial genocide that occurred at Ashraf in 2009 and 2011. And what was the United States response? We took those troops out of Ashraf. We made them retreat, despite our sworn obligation to the residents of Ashraf. We turned our back on them. And the Maliki government sent in Iraqi troops with American weapons and American vehicles. And those guns and those armored vehicles were used to kill 36 people, including 8 women, this year. And American troops weren't there to stop them. American troops weren't there to live up to their obligation. And we came in to someday hope that both Iraq and Afghanistan would have free democracies where human rights were protected. And I believe that. But after seeing what the Maliki government did at Ashraf, I'm glad I'm not governor anymore, because I don't think I could say the same thing. Mayor Giuliani said he was ashamed that America stood by idly and did nothing during the uprising. Well, I can't tell you, as I've learned about this. And when I was first contacted by the MEK, I didn't even know that Ashraf existed. But I put a lot of time in reading, and when I learned about it, and when I learned that American troops, notwithstanding our sworn obligation, turned their backs, ordered to turn their backs, and walked away and let that slaughter happen, I felt ashamed. So, Mayor Giuliani's right. All of us should speak with one voice. Americans, European Union countries, Swiss, all freedom-loving and human rights-loving peoples in this world should speak with one voice to the UN and say, send the monitors in. And let's get the blue helmets in too. If the blue helmets are in Ashraf, there will be no more deaths. And I think the Americans here can send a message to the president. And that message is, yes, the UN should send monitors in, and yes, there should be a UN peacekeeping force to protect them. But if there isn't, the United States of America gave its word on 3,400 separate individual pages. And if it takes U.S. troops to be in Ashraf to protect those monitors, we should send in U.S. troops. If not the United Nations, then it's time for the United States to live up to the pledge that it made to the residents of Camp Ashraf. Now, the mayor said and the president said that there is a key link between what's happened at Ashraf twice before and the listing of the MEK as a terrorist organization. And there's no question about that. It's the justification, the so-called moral justification or the legal justification for acts of terror to be committed against the residents of Ashraf. So we need to delist. The U.S. Court of Appeals has ordered the State Department to review the decision and ordered the State Department to make a decision, and we're long past the time that the court has ordered the State Department to make that decision. Well, we're here today to ask the State Department and the President to make that decision on two criteria. One, on the merits of the case, not on a political deal, not as a bargaining tool. We all want those American hikers, those innocent people who this Iranian government has kept for 2 years, we want them back home. We want them back home. But we want them back home for the right reasons, not for the wrong reasons. You cannot appease a leadership like there is in Iran. If you appease them once, you have to appease them twice. And if you appease them twice, you have to appease them 3 times. You cannot appease a terrorist regime. Make this decision on the merits of the case, on no other factor. And let's take a look. You know, I was a prosecutor. I was a district attorney. Mr. Sotis didn't read my whole background. I was mayor for 8 years, district attorney for 8 years in Philadelphia, and then governor. And of course, Mayor Giuliani was one of the most famous prosecutors in the history of the United States of America. And we can tell you that the merits of this case, when you look at the case, it's overwhelming for the MEK to be delisted. There are several types of evidence in the American justice system. The first is expert witnesses. Expert witnesses are people who have special reason to give an opinion about something. And they're qualified as experts to give that opinion. Well, let me just go over a quick list, and you're going to hear from some of them today, of the experts who have firsthand knowledge of the MEK, firsthand knowledge of Camp Ashraf, firsthand knowledge of what went on in Iran and Iraq, who have testified and said loud and clear publicly that the MEK should be delisted. Let's start with Louis Freeh, the head of the FBI. The head of the FBI in the Clinton administration and the Bush administration. Director Freeh was tasked with having the FBI look at all of the residents of Camp Ashraf and determine whether they were terrorists. He found none. The FBI found none. The director will talk about that. Judge Mukasey, a wonderful Circuit Court of Appeals judge who later became Attorney General, one of his basic tasks was to root out terrorism. He got reports on a daily basis, and he's spoken out before and will speak out again today that the MEK is not a terrorist organization. 3 United States generals, one of which we have with us today, General Conway, the Commandant of the Marine Corps, who were stationed in Iraq, have testified clearly that the MEK is not a terrorist organization. Colonel Wesley Morton, who couldn't be with us today, but who was the Commandant, the American Commandant at Iraq during the time that we had the responsibility for protecting it, who got to know a lot of those residents personally, has said that it's laughable to consider them terrorists, or the MEK a terrorist organization. The European Union, the United Kingdom, countries who once listed the MEK as a terrorist organization have taken affirmative steps to delist. High-ranking members of the CIA, the NSA, that's the National Security Administration, DHS, that's the Department of Homeland Security, and the State Department. We have Ambassador Reese with us today. They all have come out and said the MEK is not a terrorist organization. And the Court of Appeals itself directed Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice to re-review it because the Court of Appeals said that the finding that the MEK was a terrorist organization in 2009, and I'm quoting from the Court's opinion, did not meet the standard for listing as a terrorist organization. So, the expert testimony is overwhelming. The second thing we have is something called circumstantial evidence. Circumstantial evidence isn't direct evidence. Direct evidence are eyewitnesses, but circumstantial evidence occurs from conclusions you can draw from something not happening. And let the record show since 2001, and Mayor Giuliani referred to this, since 2001, for a decade, not a single open source terrorism database has recorded one incident of violence committed by the MEK against the United States or its allies. And there are thousands of these terrorism database organizations. Not one in 10 years has found one incident. That is strong, overwhelming circumstantial evidence that the MEK is not now, and hasn't been for at least a decade, a terrorist organization, and it's time for the U.S. to do what the European Union did, to do what the United Kingdom did, and delist the MEK. Next we have character witnesses. And those are people who testify as to the good repute of an organization or an individual. And we have the United States Congress. Now, I'm not implying that the United States Congress are characters. They're character witnesses here. But there's a House Resolution 60, that has 94 sponsors, Democrats and Republicans alike, urging the delisting of the MEK. And remember, it's a bipartisan resolution. There are tens of Democrats, tens and tens of Democrats, tens and tens of Republicans. And you don't know how unusual that is to get Democrats and Republicans. It would be hard to get Democrats and Republicans in the Congress to agree that today was Thursday. And yet we have this strong resolution with more than one out of 5 congressmen saying delist the MEK. So, we know that the terrorist list is a valuable tool for the United States. It can deny a terrorist organization the ability to operate freely in the U.S. It's an important and valuable tool. President Obama is a lawyer, and he's a good lawyer. Secretary Clinton is a lawyer, and she's a very good lawyer. The evidence is overwhelming. If we decide this case on the merits, if we adhere to American justice and the ideals of the American justice system, if we don't use this as a bargaining tool or make a political deal, if we decided on the merits, the MEK should be delisted, the United States and the UN should guarantee the security of the Ashraf residents, and as Mayor Giuliani said, the time is now. The clock is ticking. We don't know what could happen. Every day that we don't protect Ashraf, every day that the MEK remains on the terrorist list is a potential danger. In the name of the American democracy, in the name of human rights, in the name of protecting people from genocide, time to act is now.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker will be Judge Michael Mukasey. Like it was just mentioned now by Governor Randall, Judge Michael Mukasey served as Attorney General of the United States from 2007 to 2009, and he also served 18 years as a judge in New York, handling some of the most serious cases regarding terrorism. I think on this issue he's one of the best experts. So you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Rajavi. Ladies and gentlemen, you know, this is a very important gathering. It's a very important gathering because it has been said that all it takes for evil to succeed is that good people remain silent. And we have here a hall full of good people, and you have heard from and will hear from good people, intelligent people, who will not remain silent in the face of evil. And so, as Mayor Giuliani said, this evil will not succeed. Back in February, when Egyptians were first beginning to stir, at Friday prayers in Tehran, the Supreme Leader, Ali Khamenei, speaking not in Farsi, but in Arabic, to make sure that he reached and would be understood in Cairo, praised what he called this explosion of sacred anger and warned against U.S. interference in Egypt. He claimed that events in Tahrir Square were a natural extension of the 1979 revolution in Iran. He was obviously not embarrassed that in 2009 he himself had given the orders to put down the uprising in the streets of Tehran that actually began the Arab Spring. Even before the Iranians went into the streets, as you know better than I, the mullahs executed anyone with a connection with Camp Ashraf, where MEK residents are holding out despite the efforts of Iran and its collaborators within the Iraqi regime to drive them back to Iran or to exterminate them altogether. I've been before you on earlier occasions when we've looked for signs that this country, that our country, my country, the United States, so despised by Ahmadinejad and the mullahs in Tehran, would bestir itself and take some concrete action to do what Ahmadinejad and those who pull his strings most oppose and fear, and that is to remove MEK from the State Department's list of foreign terrorist organizations. And it seems ironic to have to say this afternoon that the main hope for the people of Ashraf now is that the United Nations, an organization that, let's face it, has not covered itself with glory in this struggle, will act through the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, who has at least offered to help the residents of Ashraf get the benefit of the guarantee made to them by a United States General in 2003 that they would have the status of protected persons under the Fourth Geneva Convention. The history of how we got here is known to many of you, but nonetheless bears repeating. In the 1990s, as a goodwill gesture to the regime in Tehran, the government of the U.S. placed the MEK on that list. By all accounts, this was done to help us engage with the regime and perhaps get the regime to behave. as a responsible member of the world community. Whether that policy was wise or foolish, there is absolutely no mistaking that it is and has been a complete and dismal failure. The regime has grown only more hostile toward its neighbors, toward the United States, and more repressive and more destructive of its own citizens. In the administration in which I served, unfortunately, the designation was continued, this time out of fear that if MEK were delisted, why, the Iranians would provide weapons, including deadly IEDs, to insurgents in Iraq. Well, of course, that policy, too, was a failure, because the Iranians have been providing IEDs to people in Iraq who are killing American troops all along, and they have never desisted. And so in July of 2010, MEK won a ruling from the Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit that the Secretary of State must reconsider the designation because the information she was relying on to continue the designation was not sufficient, was not at all convincing to the court. Where do we stand today? Well, in Camp Ashraf, the organization that surrendered its arms and placed itself under international protection in 2003, to the point where the residents of Ashraf each received an identification card issued by the United States indicating that that person was a protected person, and issued only after FBI agents conducted interviews of those people and found none of them to be a terrorist. That camp has been attacked twice by Iraqi troops, once in July of 2009, once in April of 2011, and both times, when the Secretary of Defense of the United States was in country, in Iraq, in a calculated slap in the face of the United States by the country to which we gave blood and treasure to free it. And what happened in March of 2011 was the murder of 35 defenseless men, women and men, using weapons and vehicles supplied by the United States, operated by troops trained by the United States, and the United States has done absolutely nothing about it. In fact, although the attack came from Iraqi troops who were photographed in the act of committing it, as I said, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees has made it explicit a few days ago that the residents of Ashraf who have filed applications for refugee status are entitled to that status. An enormous amount would be achieved by backing that finding with the very simple act of raising a UN flag over Ashraf. But again, what about the United States? What about the country that Abraham Lincoln, in the midst of the Civil War, called the last best hope of earth? What has the United States done? The European Union, the United Kingdom, have acted forcefully to remove the terrorist designation from the MEK years ago, recognizing that if that designation ever was appropriate, and that's open to doubt, it certainly is no longer. The State Department has been at this for more than a year. It has asked MEK written questions, having nothing whatsoever to do with the appropriateness of the designation, and presented all kinds of irrelevant documents, and has simply dragged its feet and refused to act. A first-year college student who used that kind of evidence to support a conclusion in a term paper would get a failing grade. This is a strategy of endless delay. Repeated requests from people on both sides of the political spectrum, as you've heard. Former governors Howard Dean of Vermont, Bill Richardson of New Mexico, both Democrats. Former Ambassador John Bolton, former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani, who you heard from, both Republicans. Former Homeland Secretary Tom Ridge, also a Republican. Two former chairmen of the Joint Chiefs of Staff have called on the United States, implored our government to end this undeserved designation. What can the Secretary do as Ahmadinejad comes to New York and stages his annual obscene performance at the UN? She can do what the European Union has already done, what the United Kingdom has already done, remove this evil designation and do it as a splendid welcome to Ahmadinejad as he comes to New York to spit into the collective face of humanity. This is a great opportunity to change the dynamic that's prevailed until now and to do it dramatically. Thank you very much.
Merci. J'appelle maintenant Monsieur Luc Bartassa, conseiller national, pour une intervention sur la situation qui a déjà été exposée concernant la situation en Suisse. Vous avez la parole.
Madame Radjavi, Mesdames, Messieurs, c'est un grand honneur et un grand plaisir aujourd'hui de porter la parole de beaucoup de membres de notre Parlement du Conseil national suisse. Mesdames et Messieurs, le gouvernement irakien et précisément son Premier ministre, M. Maliki, ont fixé un délai pour fermer le camp d'Ashraf jusqu'à la fin de l'année. Les résidents d'Ashraf ont été reconnus comme demandeurs d'asile par le Haut Commissariat aux réfugiés. Par conséquent, il est très inquiétant d'entendre Maliki insister sur ce délai. Dans son communiqué du 15 avril, Mme Navi Pillay a condamné cette attaque et demandé une enquête transparente et indépendante. Quant au secrétaire d'État de l'ONU, dans son rapport au Conseil de sécurité, M. Ban Ki-moon a exprimé ses inquiétudes et appelé les autorités irakiennes de s'abstenir de recourir à la force sous toute forme, ainsi qu'à assurer l'accès des résidents d'Ashraf aux marchandises et aux services. En tant que membres du Parlement suisse, nous demandons avec insistance à l'ONU et à Mme Pillay d'installer à Ashraf une équipe de monitoring de l'UNAMI jusqu'au transfert de tous les résidents dans les pays tiers. Nous appelons également le secrétaire général de se prononcer au sujet du délai fixé par Maliki et de demander au gouvernement irakien d'accorder le temps nécessaire pour l'accomplissement de ce transfert. Au Parlement suisse, nous emploierons tous nos efforts pour que notre gouvernement encourage l'ONU à agir dans ce sens et qu'il lui facilitera cette tâche. Je vous remercie. Merci de votre attention.
Je passe maintenant la parole à M. Éric Vauru, également membre du Parlement suisse.
Madame la Présidente, je suis heureux de vous retrouver après quelques semaines, puisque nous sommes vus déjà ici à Genève il y a quelques semaines. Alors je ne sais pas si d'ici, entre ce moment-là et aujourd'hui, les choses évoluent, mais très doucement à la Suisse. Depuis la dernière conférence que nous avons eue à Genève, le Haut Commissariat aux réfugiés a fait un pas en avant. Certes, il a reconnu les résidents d'Ashraf comme demandeurs d'asile et rappelé au gouvernement irakien leurs droits. Mais il reste encore beaucoup à faire pour le HCR. Bien que nous saluons ce premier pas, il y a plusieurs points qui sont toujours source d'inquiétude pour nous. Le gouvernement irakien a fixé une date butoir pour la fermeture du camp d'Ashraf et d'autre part, l'ONU n'a pas de présence permanente afin d'empêcher une nouvelle attaque. Bien que nous sommes en période électorale, mes collègues et moi-même au Parlement suisse, nous avons intensifié nos efforts avec l'objectif d'obtenir la protection d'Ashraf, la fin du blocus et secourir les malades et blessés, car les Ashrafiens sont pour nous des exemples de dignité et d'humanité. En supportant toutes les pressions que le gouvernement irakien a fait subir au peuple ashrafien, à la demande du régime iranien, il est en train de payer le... Les parlementaires suisses, européens, américains se démènent en intervenant à tout niveau de leurs pays respectifs pour que ces pays agissent au niveau humanitaire en premier lieu. Il appartient aux Nations unies de bouger et de bouger très fort, ce qui nous aidera aussi au niveau suisse. Et c'est son devoir. De plus, il n'est pas acceptable que Madame le Haut-Commissaire aux droits de l'homme, dont ce bureau n'est pas loin d'ici, ne fasse aucun acte concret pour assurer la protection du peuple ashrafien meurtri. Ce n'est pas grand-chose de lui demander de décider d'installer une équipe d'observateurs sur place, ceci 24 heures sur 24 et 7 jours sur 7, car il n'y a aucune confiance du gouvernement irakien et de ses forces armées. Alors, Madame le Haut-Commissaire aux droits de l'homme, à de nombreuses reprises, des parlementaires des différents pays vous ont demandé de régler ce problème, mais vous n'avez toujours pas entrepris de démarche. Et par votre inaction, vous ne facilitez pas le travail des parlementaires nationaux qui agissent en faveur du peuple ashraf, et de plus, votre inaction donne prétexte au gouvernement irakien et iranien d'attaquer le camp d'Ashraf. Ceci est inadmissible. Alors, Monsieur le Secrétaire général, Madame le Haut-Commissaire des droits de l'homme, nous exigeons, je dis bien nous exigeons que vos promesses soient respectées et agissez en dehors de toute pression qui pourrait venir de certains pays et démontrer au monde que votre rôle est d'agir aussi en faveur des minorités et ethnies qui sont menacées, dont le peuple d'Ashraf. Merci.